Now, well to the Lib Dems, and Danny Alexander is very cross indeed. He's told The Sun this morning that he's very peed off with the Tories. Those aren't his precise words, of course. You can imagine what he actually said. But he says the Conservatives have been taking all the credit for his hard work. Well, I'm pleased to say the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Danny Alexander, joins me now from the Liberal Democrat conference in Glasgow. So, we won't use that precise phrase that you used, but it rhymes with missed. You're very upset.
Well, what I think is really important for people to understand from this conference is that we as Liberal Democrats have got a very proud record over the last 4.5 years, and one of the things that we have worked hardest to achieve is the economic recovery that we are seeing in this country, the jobs that are being created, the growth that's being created, the businesses who are investing. And my message to the conference in my speech this afternoon is that that wouldn't be happening without the Liberal Democrats. So yes, it is frustrating when Conservatives try and claim all the credit, or when commentators do the same on their behalf. And, you know, I think if there's one thing that has defined this coalition government, it has been the partnership that we've had to sort out the economic problems, to deal with the terrible economic situation that was the case when we came into office, and to turn this country around. So while, of course, there's a lot more to do on that front, and increasing divergence between us about how we tackle those problems in the next Parliament, in this Parliament, the economic plan that is turning this country around is very much a Liberal Democrat authored plan, and we need to make sure that we shout about that from the rooftops over the next 7 months.
So is the coalition effectively over from today, or maybe even from a few months ago? You're like a divorced couple still living in the familial home until it's sold.
No, I wouldn't say that at all. Look, we have a job to do. It's a job that we set out in the coalition agreement that I helped negotiate back in 2010, and it's a job that we'll continue doing right till the election. And that job is about making sure that the country sticks to the coalition economic plan, jointly authored by Liberal Democrats and Conservatives, which is giving us the economic recovery that I've just been talking about. But what we also have to do, and Liberal Democrats and Conservatives have both been doing this over the last few weeks, is set out the agenda that we have for the future of the country. And that's where I think you see an ever-widening gap between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, and particularly on the economy and the deficit, where, you know, both parties agree that we have to finish the job of balancing the books. But the Conservatives set out a plan last week which was all about saying that the working poor should pay the price of dealing with those problems, and that they wouldn't be willing to ask the wealthy to pay a single extra penny, whereas we say we've got to finish the job, but it's got to be done fairly.
Well, it wasn't all about that, was it? Because they nicked your idea of pushing up the threshold at which you start paying tax. That presumably should help some of the working poor. But shouldn't you be equally upset with the Labour Party? Because, after all, they've nicked your mansion tax idea.
Well, it's true that if you like, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and both parties have been trying to claim Liberal Democrat policy ideas. But the truth in this Parliament is that we would not be seeing the very large tax cuts for 26 million working people, worth from next April £800 a year, if it hadn't been for the fact that we wrote it into the Liberal Democrat manifesto last time, and particularly if it hadn't been the fact that Nick Clegg and I fought hard to deliver that policy day and daily throughout the last 4.5 years. That's been one of our most important achievements. And, you know, when the Conservatives say that they're going to raise the tax allowance to £12,500 in the next Parliament, I think people should look at the small print, because what they're also saying is the price for that is going to be paid by the self-same people who are working hard on low incomes, and at the same time they're going to give a tax break 4 or 5 times larger to the best off 15% of society. Okay. That's their real priorities. We're setting out tax measures that would ask the wealthy to pay a bit more to help cover the costs of things like the income tax allowance going up to £12,500, yeah, which is a Lib Dem idea, and we're not going to run away from it just because the Conservatives try to pretend it's theirs. And including, I mean, other flagship policy, of course, the mansion tax, which I mentioned there, and Labour's take on it. But has that changed now? Mr Clegg seems to be saying that the mansion tax will now not be a percentage levy on the value of the property above £2 million, that there will just, in effect, be new council tax bans. Well, it has changed, but it actually changed about 6 months ago. I set that out in a speech in London, and it's contained within the pre-manifesto policy document that the party conference here will be democratically debating on Tuesday. The whole reason to put an additional levy on high-value properties is because the council tax system is so unfair, in that a home worth £500,000 pays the same amount of council tax as a home worth £50 million. So what we will do is add additional bands and a national tax on top of council tax. That money will be collected by local authorities and pooled centrally, and every penny of it on the Liberal Democrat plan will go towards helping to deal with the deficit, balance the books in the next Parliament. So that's our plan. It's a central part of our tax policy, and obviously we'll set out more details of it as we get closer to the election.
Can I just take you back to those coalition negotiations, talking about the state of relations right now, but to those balmy days of May, that's with an L, of balmy days of May 2010 and the Rose Garden glow, as it were. And, I've heard from Tim Farron earlier this morning, we heard from Nick Clegg about how, in effect, the Conservatives pulled the wool over your eyes. They told you they were green, they told you they were into human rights, they said they wouldn't bang on about Europe, etc., etc. Now, you were key, as we all know, to those negotiations. Do you think you were naive?
No, not at all. I think that we negotiated a very good coalition agreement, delivered 3/4 of the policies in the Lib Dem election manifesto, and most importantly, delivered a plan that has turned the UK economy around. But I think what you've seen on a lot of issues is actually the Conservatives move away from the sort of compassionate conservatism that they were talking about back in 2010 to a much sort of nastier, harder-edged approach. And that's a change that's taken place within their party. So you hear more and more about bashing the European Union, attacking the Human Rights Act, less and less about things like fairness. We hardly heard the phrase "we're all in this together" at all at the Tory party conference. You hear nothing at all now about tackling climate change, despite the fact that one of this government's achievements, driven by the Liberal Democrats, is to have the largest amount of investment in green energy ever in the history of this country. So we are the greenest government ever. The Conservatives just don't talk about it anymore.
But I just want to kind of relate that point I made perhaps to your poll rating. I mean, it is terrible, even if it isn't as bad as the polls show. You've lost a huge amount of support since the general election. And let me put this to you. Is it a bit like what we're describing, has happened after those coalition negotiations, and we've heard it from you again there, that the Conservatives pull the wool over your eyes? When you watch a programme like Watchdog and you see someone being conned by a pretty obvious scam, some of your sympathy is not with those that have been conned. You feel that they were gullible, that they shouldn't have fallen for it. That's you, that's the Liberal Democrats.
Well, actually, I didn't say the Conservatives pulled the wool over our eyes. Far from it. I said that over the last few years, since we entered coalition, they've moved more and more to the right in their rhetoric and in the policies they're putting for the next Parliament. Labour is moving more and more to the left. They don't even remember that there's a deficit, much less have any ideas about what to do about it. And actually, I think most people want this country to remain anchored in the centre ground. They don't want to lurch to left or right with a single-party government of either hue in the next Parliament. That's the space that we have to carve out. I acknowledge that we've got a lot of work to do to get across to people the huge Liberal Democrat achievements of this Parliament and to explain what we do in the next. But I think fundamentally the role of the Liberal Democrats, which is to keep this country on the straight and narrow, anchored in the centre ground, making sure that we can balance the books but do it fairly, have a strong economy and a fair society, something that neither other party can deliver both of. I think that's a role that people want to see played by the Liberal Democrats, and I'm very confident that we will do a lot better in the election in 2015 than either these polls or most commentators suggest.